Over the last 6 years, the amount of spending per person has gone up 30% over and above inflation. But do we have more kids at school? No. Are they learning more? No. Are the streets safer? No. Are the roads and transport systems better? No. Do we have GPs that are easier to get into or more operations occurring into our hospitals? No, we don't have any of those things. And that's why the next government is going to have some honesty about what this country can afford and how it is going to deliver better results. The alternative is a long, slow slip, not catastrophic, but a gradual decline in living standards as New Zealand becomes a kind of middle-income country that's nice to visit, but not reaching the potential of a first-world country and an island paradise that we all aspire to. If we're prepared to make the choices, cut the government waste, cut the red tape and regulation, and finally say that business is a force for good and success is something that we welcome, then our country can be the greatest little country on earth. But it's going to take more than saying, let's just keep on going in the same direction but show up in a blue tie on Monday. You need real change. I agree with Nicola when she said this government doesn't have a tax problem, it has a spending problem. And that is the real problem that New Zealand has, is that this government is spending far too much money. And we're going to have to be honest. And it's not always popular to be honest, and you won't always agree with me, but let me give you one example. We're spending $400 million a year on fees free. Now, these guys said it'd be for 3 years. Even they didn't want to follow it through. We've spent $2 billion on fees free. That's now borrowed money because every dollar at the margin is borrowed. Now, if it got more disadvantaged kids to school, if it got more kids, and I mean school in the sense of tertiary, if it got more kids to school, tertiary at all, then I might be in favour of it. But the truth is, we've spent $2 billion of borrowed money for no better outcomes in tertiary education. Now, when you see that evidence, you've got a choice. You can blithely keep going and say, oh, well, let's hope that we can borrow a few billion more, as Fred Dagg used to say, or you can actually be honest and stop it. Grant Robertson, who I admire for having the best of intentions, manages to screw it up again and again. I thought that Grant was running away with the books, but the prefo has shown he's run away. Even I didn't think Grant could run that fast away with the books, but that's what he's done. And so we're looking at the numbers again, and we are looking at the numbers, and we will put out our new alternative budget with the benefit of the new numbers on Tuesday, because people deserve that honesty. They deserve to know what is possible and what can be done, and we will present that on Tuesday. The fact is that monetary policy has been loose, and it has been used to support government expenditure. In fact, they've admitted that they brought down the government's interest rate throughout COVID deliberately in their own papers. We are now paying for that in inflation because there is no such thing as a free lunch. And one thing the next government has to do is make sure that the Reserve Bank has one target, and that's inflation. They can't do inflation and employment because you can't pull one lever in two directions at the same time. And then we've got to give them a policy targets agreement that actually tells them they need to get inflation under control within a time frame. What do we need to do about infrastructure? Well, basically in New Zealand, the only way to pay for it is if the council or the Crown can afford it on its balance sheet. If they can't afford it, you just wait another generation, see if it gets built. Probably not. I mean, in Auckland, we've been waiting since 1959 for a second harbour crossing. The whole generation been and gone while we're waiting. What we need to do is set partnerships between the central government and each region, including here, and say this is the wish list, this is what we'd like to build out as infrastructure, and this is what the Crown and the Council can realistically afford. And then we should open up the book and say investors within New Zealand, it could be ACC, it could be iwi, it could be a super fund, and those outside, it could be the Canada Pension Plan, should have the opportunity to say we will build this on the following terms, we'll toll it for this many years at this price, and if the local community votes for it to go ahead because they're sick of waiting generations for anything to happen, they should be allowed to do it. In short, we have only one way of funding and financing infrastructure in New Zealand. Overseas, they use many ways, and if we don't start doing that too, then we will find that our potential to bring more people here, to build more interesting businesses, to live a better life, to be safer on our roads, and do all of the things that we wish to do will just stagnate. And this is why we need fresh new ideas. Tourism generates a massive amount of revenue, especially through GST for central government. Our view is that fast-growing areas like Queenstown, like Hamilton, like Tauranga, like Auckland, in fact everywhere, should be getting a portion of the GST that central government collects on development in that area. I was talking to people at the council today. They said, you know what, that would mean about $80 million a year for Queenstown under ACT's policy, because there's so much development going on. The beautiful thing about it is how it changes council's incentives. You see, there's only one time a council actually comes to you and gives you fast service. That's when they're issuing a parking ticket. You know why? Because they get revenue for issuing you a piece of paper. And if we did the same thing with building consents, resource consents, if they got revenue in return for allowing development in their area, they'd have the incentive, but also the means to pay for that development. So that would be a very similar effect, although not specifically the same as a local visitor levy.